You know how sometimes they'll have like extended versions or alternate versions of certain movies? I think that that's what they should do with Captain America Brave New World. There should be a mustache edition, like one where Harrison Ford gets a mustache edited onto his face, and then Red Hulk actually has more hair on his chest and a giant burly mustache. Okay, that's just how I picture Red Hulk. I know that not all of his appearances featured a mustache for, Ross as well as Red Hulk, but it feels right, okay? I know a lot of people are against mustaches and they're not cool and they're not sleek anymore like they were, back in the 90s, or maybe they were never cool. I'm not 100% sure, but, it is what it is. Let's get straight into today's video. I actually wanted to give you guys my personal take, my perspective on Captain America Brave New World. I know it's getting a ton of hate. It didn't receive great reviews. On top of that, the film is maybe going to break even in terms of its budget. I think it was somewhere along the lines of like 300 million, and I think it will be able to hit that. But honestly, guys, it's extremely sad to see the MCU in absolute shambles. Nobody's watching Daredevil. Nobody went to watch this movie. Nobody wanted to sit on those disgusting theater chairs to actually experience this film on the big screen, and I honestly think it's really sad. Now, don't get me wrong, this film isn't perfect, and it's not one of my top like 10 favorite MCU films, but it's still a solid entry. There are some issues here and there, but for the most part, I don't think they get in the way of fully being able to enjoy the film. I do agree Mackie is just not capable of carrying an entire franchise, let alone an MCU film of this caliber with those type of expectations. I've often said that I don't consider Chris Evans to be a great actor, but I think the Captain America role absolutely fit him perfectly. Not to mention there's something about him. He has that charisma. People just tend to gravitate towards him as Captain America. And even though I think Mackie is a good, solid actor, I just don't think that he has that necessarily. He doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the it factor that draws people to him. And unfortunately, I just don't think that people are really liking him as a central character in an MCU film. Danny Ramirez also had some issues here. I mean, he's a good, solid actor, and I think eventually he'll become like a poor man's John Bernthal, which isn't an offense, by the way. That's actually somewhat of a compliment, I guess. But overall, I think the cast was a little bit mixed here. I think it was bottom heavy, if that makes any sense. Like Harrison Ford, anytime he's on screen, he completely steals the spotlight. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is Han Solo and he's had some of the greatest roles ever. I mean, he was also Indiana Jones for a long period of time. And so I think just because of that, he does tend to take over in every single scene that he's featured in. However, in this film, he still feels like Ross. Even though I prefer William Hurt, he will always be my Thunderbolt Ross. But here, I think he does a really good job. He portrays exactly what Ross is all about. Even in the comic books, he's always kind of like a semi-torn / gray character. He's not always a good guy. He's not always necessarily a bad guy, and you can kind of see that conflict play out here. Giancarlo is also in the film for, a brief period of time, but same thing. We know him as some of the best villains that we've ever been introduced to. He was Moff Gideon. He was Gus in Breaking Bad. I mean, he's just always breathing and existing whatever character he's portraying, and that's why I think he's had so much success, whether it was in live action shows or now films. Again, when he is on screen, he completely steals the show. But those are two minor characters. They're not featured as heavily as Mackie and some of the other actors. And I think that was kind of one of the pitfalls that the film falls into. Another big one obviously has to do with the action. It's just not the same. I think MCU is definitely scaling back. They're trying to save a little bit of money. There were definitely budgetary constraints here that kept the film from being an all-out, action fest, which I think the film should have been. There were some sequences that felt kind of cheap. They also had a ton of issues with pacing. Even though the film is under 2 hours, there were moments where you kind of became aware that the film was dragging a little bit. But overall, I have to say, I think the critics really got this wrong. I think fans alike are being brainwashed by the media as a whole. I think there are a lot of people out there that are just not giving this film the opportunity or the day of light based on some really bad reviews from just the population in general, which I'm I'm not sure what's going on here. As I said, it's not the best MCU movie. It is definitely not the best Captain America film, but I think it's a good solid entry into the MCU. It's very bottom heavy. I already mentioned that before, but you have a lot of low key actors doing some great stuff, whether that's Harrison Ford or Giancarlo, just having some really memorable appearances. And I think you can kind of build on that for the foreseeable future. Not to mention that payoff with Red Hulk was absolutely worth it. I feel like that scene would have been, or should have been, a little bit longer. But I think this film, at its core, it's a Captain America film. It's a movie about ideals, morals, ethics. Ross has one vision of how, the superheroes should handle their business. And then the Avengers, or, in this case, Mackie's character has a completely different version or a vision of how they're supposed to run things. At the end of the day, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. This was kind of brought up during Civil War, where, a certain percentage of the Avengers were all about having people, checking up on them, having the government or giving or handing a little bit more power to the government, and, kind of them overseeing the Avengers, whereas in Captain America was about the heroes themselves taking on the responsibility and then living with the consequences. But I think there's, in my personal opinion, I was always kind of Team Iron Man. I do feel like they should have had a governmental agency kind of overseeing what it is that they're doing, because at the end of the day, a lot of these people were criminals. Let's not forget Ant-Man, who is kind of a part of the Avengers, was a thief at one point, and then other people like Natasha was a spy. She was literally an assassin for a long period of time in her life. So a lot of these characters, or a lot of these individuals, were not necessarily trustworthy. And so I've always understood why Ross saw things the way that he saw them. And I think that's what the film is about. It's about two people clashing, having different morals, having different ethical visions for the future. And that's really what the film is about. It builds up the tension, not just between Ross and the new Captain America, but just in general. There are some really interesting things happening here. It almost leads to an all-out, World War III. And that's what really keeps you on the edge of your seat. That's what really keeps you intrigued to see what's going to happen next, to see how all of this is going to unfold. I will say it's a little bit too much like Civil War. They kind of copy and pasted certain aspects of that particular film, and I don't know if they necessarily work as well with Captain America Brave New World. But as I said at the beginning of the video, and I continue to say it, and I will continue to say it as long as I possibly can, I think modern day critics, modern day moviegoers just have this really weird perspective on what the MCU is supposed to be. It's not as good as Endgame. It's not as good as Infinity War, but let's not forget, at the beginning, or I should say the middle part of the MCU that we remember, there were some really bad movies in there. I think this movie is better than the second Thor film. I think it's better probably than Iron Man 3. I would even dare say it's probably better than some of the Disney Plus shows that we've seen. I would also put it ahead of, for example, the first two Avengers films. So I still think it's a good solid entry into the MCU. It's a good solid film. Don't listen to critics. Don't listen to all of this bad attention the film is getting. I think that it's an absolute disservice. If you're a big hardcore MCU fan, give this film a try. Or if you're even a casual fan, give it a watch. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Don't go in there thinking this is going to be MCU at its peak, but I think it's a good building block for the future. This is a good film to jump off of and, start building the next era of the MCU. But this is just my personal humble opinion. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Usually when it comes to the MCU, it feels like I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. I didn't love Deadpool, and it seems, people absolutely, were jizzing over that film. And then, Captain America Brave New World, I actually enjoyed it, and most of the people going are just not really liking it. I will say I'm a little bit frustrated also with the box office numbers. I think this film is barely going to break even with the actual budget and the marketing being included. I think it would just barely being able to hit about the 300 million mark, which is kind of an achievement if you really think about it. A lot of MCU films, whether it was from Sony or whether it was from Disney itself, were barely hitting over 100 million. I think the newest Craven film was under 100 million. But then you had Madam Web hitting 100 million. I think Captain Marvel, the latest entry of Captain Marvel, was extremely low as well. This film kind of feels like Ant-Man, where it's barely going to break even, but I think it'll have kind of a little bit of a resurgence with the home video entertainment. Maybe, people purchase the film, watch it at home, or maybe Disney Plus, it gets a little bit of a spike. We'll see. I just honestly feel like it's a disservice to not go out and at least give this film just a try. Just watch the film and then you can make your own mind about it. It's not the greatest MCU movie. It's not one of the best, but it's a good, solid film. I enjoyed it. I think that final sequence between Captain America and Ross was absolutely worth it. It felt a little bit short, I think, because you waited so long to finally see it come to fruition. But it was 100% worth it. A great film, and just really well written, great dialogue all around. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts down below. Did you guys enjoy this film? Have you watched it? Have you not watched it? Have you let critics ever influence you when it comes down to watching a movie? Like, if it gets bad reviews, do you steer clear of it, or do you run head first to watch it? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.